So today we're going to be working with built-in functions and functions to manipulate strings. We're going to start with faculty.xlsm, so go ahead and download that, get it open, and we will take a look. Controls in the middle a bit. All right, these are the faculty of the Marriott School of Management. There's me. And other professors you've had, they're here too. And that's their faculty ID, it's not their BYU ID. That's whatever the ID record is of their information in the Marriott School site that gets their telephone number, kind of all their contact information. This is just information I pulled off the faculty directory at the Marriott School. So in fact, when we look at the faculty page, this is actually a web query that we'll pull in the information for one particular person. I think we've got Greg Anderson is who we've got in here now. Yeah, so here's Greg Anderson, and here's his office, 782 Tanner Building, phone number, and all this information. Now, the problem here is it's too small. The problem is that if we look here, so far when we've worked with web queries, we just said, the data we want sitting in a cell, grab that data out of the cell and put it somewhere else. What's the problem with the way that this telephone number is done? It's not just a phone number in that cell. We can't just take off that cell. We're going to have to say, we've got to figure out how to get just the phone number. So if we're going to modify this code so that we could run this and have it actually pull in all of this faculty directory information, we're going to need to be a little more sophisticated. And so that's what we're going to use as the background for this example. Questions? Okay, so open up the code. Finally found out how to make the font go larger. Actually, I didn't. I just rebooted and then shut down Excel, and then anyway, it finally stuck. So hopefully it'll stay larger. That's a little more readable, I hope. And let's take a look. So we've got code here. So get faculty. If you press Control-Shift-F and you're actually on the faculty sheet, you're on the list sheet. Actually, I think you have to be on an ID. Then it should run this and bring in the information. But it's not actually pulling the information off. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Why don't we go ahead and review just a minute. We covered a lot of stuff about variables last time we were together. We're going to do an example with one of the most complex variable types that we introduced last Wednesday. So let's just review a couple of the other data types. Three data types that allow us to store integer values. Which one is the smallest? Takes only 1 byte of memory. The type is byte. Next one bigger takes 2 bytes, holds a bigger number. Integer, the next one bigger is long. We talked about 3 different kinds that you could put a decimal point into. What are they? Single precision floating point number, double precision floating point number, and triple. No, there's no triple. Currency was the other one. It's a decimal, but it's not floating point. It's fixed point. We talked about the string data type, just collections of characters, and we talked about the object data type. And I could see it in your faces. Some of you are going, why? Oh, why would you ever use the object data type? I'm going to show you a great reason why we might use it today. Now, if I was just recording myself doing this whole web query process, what would I do? I'm trying to find the phone number. What's my next step? I've got the results of the web query, and that's what we have right here. We've done a refresh, and so we've got the results of this query. If you look at the URL, we've got the URL here, and it's pulling whatever value we have in A1. So it's getting the right person. It's getting refreshed. At this point, we have the data. What's the next step? I want to get the phone number. I'll tell you right now, the phone number does not always come into the same row. It doesn't always come into the same cell. So the next step is what? We've got to find what it is we're looking for. Now, what are we going to look for? Yeah. So far, we've done exact match searches, but in this case, we just want to find something that says phone : space in it, and then we found the right cell. We found the cell we're after. So we can record ourselves doing that, but at this point in our lives, we're happy to type a little more. And so I'm just going to do the find. Now, typically when you record it, it records it this way, cells.find. Which cells are we talking about? All of them on the active sheet. Now, I happen to know, looking at this, I'm pretty confident this is only ever going to come in column 1. It's not going to sometimes show over here in column F or column A. And so I could limit this to say, you know what, I don't want all the cells, I want columns, C-O-L-U-M-S, columns 1.cells.find. C-O-L-U-M-S, columns 1.cells.find. And that would limit it just to that particular column. All right, so what am I going to look for? Colon space. And then, what am I going to do? What's the next argument? The next argument here, actually, I think if we just start off with cells, and put that columns 1 in front of it later, yeah, it'll give us a little more help here. What cell do we want to look after? Don't look after any cell, just regular old cell, that's fine. I'll just put a comma there, I'll skip that one. What am I going to look in, like formulas or formatting or values? Just, this is just data, so I can skip that one. Here's the one. What am I going to look at? Here's where I'm going to say XL, I'm going to say XL part. We talked about variables. In fact, someone just tell me, what is a variable? It's two parts to it. It's a placeholder, but a little more specific. It is a blank with a blank. That helping? It's a location in memory with a name. Yeah, so we give it a name. In this case, we'll declare one right now. Dim found cell as object. Okay. So this will be the name of it, and when this line gets processed, just before this procedure runs, then VBA is going to say, hey, operating system, give me some memory. The operating system gives it back an address, and then VBA is going to keep the mapping for us between the name of that variable, which we called it found cell, and whatever address it is. So it's an address with a name. It's a location in memory with a name. A constant, which I didn't cover last time, I meant to. A constant is exactly the same thing. It's a named location in memory. The difference is, with a constant, as soon as I set the value, I can't ever change it. Variable, I can change it. A constant, I set it once and it's set. In fact, it's actually set at the point when the code compiles. So my code can't even figure it out to set its first value. It has to be set to a known value before it starts running. We can't calculate the value and then put it in a constant. It's got to be set before. This is the syntax actually to make a constant. If I want to, I can say const pi equals 3.1415. And so here's the thing. I actually have to give it a value. I can't do any calculation because this actually gets set before anything starts executing. I have to give it a literal value. That's what a constant is. So later I can say pi. It's a location in memory with the name of pi. What's stored in that location in memory? That number is stored there. Questions?
Could you still have a function later on where you said pi equals pi plus more, and would it change it?
Yeah, that's the whole point. With a constant, I cannot say pi equals something else. A variable I could, constant I can't. I bring this up because when we look at this right here, XL part, that's a constant. It's a named value. It's predefined in Excel, so I don't have to declare it, but it's already defined. The point is that I could, bring this up on the line, put a comment on it, is that I could come up here and say, I want to print XL part, and it said that's 2. XL part is just a name for a location in memory. What's stored in that location in memory? 2. If I wanted to, I could put here, I could put 2 right here, and it would behave exactly the same way, because that's all XL part does, is it says it's a name for location in memory, and what's stored there is the value 2. Yeah?
So what's the point of using XL part instead of just the number 2?
What's the value? So you tell me, which one do you like better? If you were reading it, which one do you like better? What's that? What if you knew that this argument, that the parameter I'm passing here, is the look in parameter? Or no, the look at parameter. What's that?
It should be called Excel lookup. It doesn't describe what it does.
Yeah, you don't want to call it look at. It's the answer to what is it going to look at. The parameter is, what do you want me to look at? And the answer is either to or Excel part. And what I'm saying here is the whole reason that we create these kind of constants is so when I look at this I can go, oh yeah, we're looking for a phone, and it doesn't have to be the whole cell. It can be any part of the cell that finds it. That's why we create, that's why these kinds of names were created. And it's the reason that we would create constants. One of the reasons we create constants as well. Okay? All right. So now, if we were recording this, it would end up, there'd be a little more words in here because it wouldn't skip those arguments. But then it would say activate. You want to find it and activate it. You may not remember this code, ACTIE. Now, you might have come across this. What's going to happen if we run this and for whatever reason, nowhere on the page does it say phone colon space? What's going to happen to this statement? It's going to be an error. You're going to try to activate a cell. You've assumed that this function is going to return a cell, but it didn't. It couldn't find a cell to return, so it returned nothing. You tried to activate nothing. The cell didn't know what to do. And so it gave you an error. So here's what I'm going to do. Instead of just assuming we can find it and activating it, I am going to say, you know what? I want to connect the results of this method onto an object variable. And then I want to look at that object variable and decide if I can activate it, and then maybe I'll activate it.
Or two.
What's that?
If there are two phone numbers.
Ah, the question is, what if there are two cells that start with phone number? That's okay. This is going to find the first one. If I want to find the next one, there's a find next method that we can work with to find the next one. You make a loop that goes and finds them all. But we're just going to try to find the first one. Okay, so instead of activating it, I have declared a variable found cell as object. And I'm going to come here and say, this is going to return back an object, either the range that it found or nothing. And so let's do this. Set found cell equal to. Now, with some of these other variables that we've talked about, like a byte variable, dim x as byte, x equals 5, it puts the value 5 right there in memory. It allocates a little tiny piece of memory, 1 byte of memory, and then it allows me to put a value into it and bring it back. So, when I say dim found cell as object, what does it actually allocate? It allocates pretty relatively small chunk of memory, and what am I going to be able to put in there? Yeah, it's actually, what I'm allowed to put in there is the address, the memory address of some object where it's loaded in memory. So what's going to happen is I got all these cells. They're all loaded in memory. The find method is going to find one of them. Hopefully, it'll find one of them. And it's going to return the address of that. And we want to put that address, store it right here in this variable. So that's why we say the keyword set. We can't just say the name of the variable equals that. The reason we have to use the keyword set, remember there's two words that we use when we're making assignments. Set is one of them, and the other one is optional. What is it? We use it a couple of times at the beginning of the semester, but we got tired of typing. Let. Set and let. So let is the one we use for primitive values. Let x equal 5, and that would put the value 5 in that memory location. Set then says, oh, no. We're not trying to put a value somewhere. We are trying to put the address of this object, whatever object this returns, into this location. That's just what it means. And the reason we have to use it is suppose that found cell, instead of making found cell an object, what if we made it a variant? Variant can behave like anything. If I made this a variant, then what does this mean? Remember that cells have a default property. What's the default property for a cell? It's the value. And so if I don't tell it which property I'm talking about, it assumes the value. Do you see how this could mean, oh yeah, found cell, variant type, could take a value, whatever we want. It's going to equal this cell. Well, does it mean to bind to the object, the address of this cell, or does it mean to take the value from that cell and put it in that location in memory? The answer is ambiguous. And so The designers of the language said if you want to do this advanced thing, if you want to bind an object variable onto an object, you have to say the keyword set. Without the keyword set, we're going to think you're trying to just assign the default property of this object into the variable. Okay? So that's just a thing you have to learn about the language when you're going to connect an object variable to an object. You have to say the keyword set. One more thing to remember, then we'll come back to the guts of this one. And that is, there are lots of different kinds of objects I can declare it as. If I declare this as object, it could bind onto any kind of object, a worksheet, a workbook, a chart, the title of a chart. It could bind onto a cell. Or if I only want it to bind onto ranges, what do I put here? As range. Still an object variable. But now it says the only kind of object it can bind onto is a range. And now when I say found cell dot in my code, it knows that it's a range object, and so it brings up the IntelliSense help for range objects. That's really the main reason that I put the specific type of object I'm talking about. Okay. So now, at this point, found cell is going to be bound onto that object. In fact, let's do this. I'm going to go ahead and run this. I'm going to make sure that I'm on the list sheet and I actually have a faculty member. I'll do myself. And Control-Shift-F should run that. It's kind of a slow process, unfortunately. I'm not sure why Marriott School's server is slow to bring back this information, but it's going to take a minute. And then when it comes back, it should hit that breakpoint. I put a breakpoint just after the find. Okay, so at this point, we've executed to here. If you want to do it along, that's fine, but you don't have to. You probably just fine to watch this example. So now, if I come up here and just print found cell, it's going to print the phone number that it found. But what do I really mean when I say found cell? Found cell is a reference to a range. So what should I put here to get that to print? Dot value. I can ask for the address. I'll show the address of that cell. So why does it work without putting dot value on the end? Value is the default property of a range. I said print this range, and it said to me, "You poor, silly programmer, you can't print a range. It's too complex. It's got all this stuff. There's no way to print it. I'll just print the thing I think you most want, and that's about it." That's what it does. So, but I want to make sure, I know we're talking about it's an object, so I'm going to refer to it then. And that's what an object variable is. Once it's bound onto it, you can use that variable as a nickname for the object itself. It's kind of handy. Now, here's the trick. We need a way to be able to tell, did it find the cell it was looking for? Because if it found the cell it's looking for, then hey, I'm ready to activate that cell and then work with it. If it didn't, I got a problem. And I want to know that. And when we recorded this, we just assumed it was going to find it. So now that we've connected this onto another object variable, we can take a closer look at that thing. Watch this. It turns out that we can ask, I might have shown this to you last time we were together, I don't remember. Type name. Did we talk about the type name function? Here's a string of characters. I ask what type of that is. It goes, oh, that's a string. I'm going to look for a particular number, 1.02. Oh, that's a double precision floating point number. It could have done it with a single, but it chose double. I should create it. But I can also ask for the type name of an object variable. Tell me what is it bound onto? It's a range. Because it found that cell and bound onto it, if I look at the type name and it says range, aha! We found a range. So I'll do that with this statement right here. If the type name of my found cell equals, in this case sensitive, range, then I'm going to do something. Or else I'm not going to do something different. Have you ever seen me type that much in a row without making a mistake? It was a miracle. It was a miracle. Maybe I'll put a message box up here. MSGVOX. No phone found. And then maybe I will just exit the subject. We're done with this. Skip by whatever else is happening below. But if we did find the cell, now we're ready to activate the cell. Any guesses on how I'm going to activate that cell? Yeah, I want to refer to a particular cell. Found cell will get me there. I'll call the activate method. That's that cell knows how to make itself active. So found cell.activate. So now we only activate the cell if it finds it. If it doesn't, we go through a different path. If we just say find and activate, it'll work great when it's there, but otherwise it'll cause us an error. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and come back out. I'm going to drag myself back up here to found cell. And I'm going to change it to something that it won't find. Xphone. There's no Xphone. So now I'll step through this with F8. It doesn't equal range, and so it'll drop to the else. That's okay, but now let's see, what does it, so what does it equal if it's not range? We now know that the type name of found cell isn't range, otherwise we would have come into this statement right here. So pray, what is it? It's nothing. It seems a little bit strange. In VBA, nothing is something. Nothing is actually an object. It doesn't have any properties or methods that I know of. We don't do anything with nothing. Nothing dot. There's nothing. There's no properties. There's no methods. But it's an object. And every object variable, until it gets bound onto some other kind of object, is bound onto nothing. It's saying, so somewhere in memory, somewhere, there's an object. There's a memory address. There's an object created there. What's the type of that object? What's the type of that? It's nothing. That object is nothing. And whenever I create an object variable, it starts off with the memory address of nothing. So I can ask it, is it nothing or is it something else? So it's just an object type, like range or like worksheet, that all object variables are bound onto until they get bound to something else. You probably don't need to know that especially, because typically the way we do it is we check to see if the type name is equal to range. Then we know what to do. But sometimes you only want to connect if it's not bound to anything, or if it's bound to nothing. You can expect for that as well. Okay. So now that I know that I found it, I'm ready to actually extract off the telephone number. And so I'm going to do that by calling another sub-procedure. I'm going to call it getPhoneNumber. Now, that doesn't exist yet. I got to create it. So I'm going to stop my code and we'll go create it. What we're going to do is so simple. I could just put it right here, but I would like to separate this code so we don't have to run the whole thing to be able to test this part. Does that make sense? We're going to call the sub-procedure, in the main flow of things. But for now, let's just come up here and put this where we can test it. So sub get phone number. It's going to assume that the active cell has the phone number that we're working with. Right? Because that's what we did. Just before we called it, what did we do? We activated the cell we found, and then we called get phone number. So I'm going to declare a couple of variables here. Full number as a string, and phone number as a string. So full number, maybe not the best thing, but the whole point is that when we look at this phone, when we look at the value in here, that's the whole point. I'm trying to get rid of the word phone, so that once I've got the value, I can bring it over here and just drop in just the number without phone colon in front of it. I'm going to parse off just the number. That's what we're trying to do. Okay. And so, I think we're ready to start looking at that. Let's go ahead and I'm going to put the full number into this variable. Full number equals active cell value. Now I should be able to make sure I've got my active cell actually on my phone number here. So now what I'm doing is I've got my faculty sheet up. Right around 166, 167, you should see someone's phone number. Might not be mine. Let's make sure that that's active. And with that active, we should be able to run this get phone number, put a breakpoint at the end. I will run it, and I should be able to ask what the full number is. It should just be the text of that cell. So now I'm going to work with full number and try to extract off just the phone number. That's the goal. You understand what we're about, what we're trying to do here? So far, so good? Anyone hoping for a little more discussion before we start doing this part? Okay. Any thoughts? How am I going to convert this to just this part? Okay, so, all right, let's talk about find. So, you want to find a colon? You want to find the first space?
I would look at the whole length, and then maybe minus the position of 5 or some sort of variation.
Minus the position of the
colon. Sorry.
All right, let's start with that.
Something like that.
We are going to do this in several different ways. We're going to take your approach right now. So first, what you're saying is we need to know where that colon is. Well, one way to know where the colon is to count. P-H-O-N-E, colon is the 6th character. Now that works if and only if what? If it always starts with phone. What if sometimes it says telephone? Or sometimes, whatever. In other words, we could know that it's the 6th character if we're certain it's always going to have 5 characters before it. But what if it doesn't? That's what usually it is. We've got to find the colon. So let's assume that it's not always going to have phone. It might be, but the colon's where we're going to start. We'll start with that approach. The question?
Well, in this case, we do know that it's phone because we've searched. We've got to control find the phone, right? So
Yes! Comment is, hey, the only reason we found this is because we looked for a phone. No, we don't. Because if what it said was telephone, what we were looking for was phone colon space. And it still would have found it. So we're not, at this point, we're not positive. Now we think, we know enough about the way these different web pages work. Probably the phone number is stored in a database somewhere. When we ask for this web page, it reads out the phone number, and it's always just going to, some script is putting phone colon in front of it, and so we're probably pretty comfortable with that. So it's a little simpler if we just assume it's going to say phone. Let's start with that, but I do want to come to your suggestion. There's a comment here and then here.
Let's just say, could you trim it and then take the right 12 characters?
So trim, you mean suck out all the spaces and then just take the right 12 characters. I like that. We may try that in a minute. What's the comment over here? Something similar?
Unless it doesn't have hyphens in that case.
Yeah, so we're not quite sure. But let's take the simplest case. Let's assume for a moment that the phone numbers are always formatted the same way. Let's kind of look at the simple way to do this. So but I want to come to several of these other suggestions and see how we would do that. And sometimes you need to, depending on what the assumptions are about what's going on. Okay, so we've got a full number here that we're working with. So now, let's just do this. I'm going to set my phone number equal to, so listen, if it's always the rightmost 12 characters, we've got a function for that. It's called right. I tell it what I want to look at. Look at full number and take the rightmost 12 characters. And so if I was to do this just in a way that I could see it with the literals, right now what is in full number is just what we have in quotes here. If I'm asking for the rightmost 12 characters of that, it just brings me back the phone number. So it's a pretty simple way, and depending on what our assumptions are about how this string is formatted, this might be a great way to do it. So now if I execute that line, we'll have phone number. And let's see. At this point in my code, my faculty is my active sheet. So now that I've got the phone number, I'm ready to activate my list sheet, do an offset from the active cell. So let's go ahead and do that. Sheets list dot activate, then active cell dot offset 0 rows and 2 columns. This is what will be active. I want to offset 2. I'm going to put the phone number right there. That looks good. Dot value. Now, if we were recording it, it would have selected it, and then we would have said active cell dot. We don't want to select it, so we'll just say value equals phone number. And then I'm going to go ahead and activate back to the faculty sheet. Questions? We could be more efficient about this, but because this kind of started off with the recorded approach, we're going to go ahead and take this. So I should be able to just execute these lines, F8, F8, F8. Hopefully that has put over here on the faculty sheet, let's put that phone number right there. So this was step 1 about how we could pull that phone number up. Questions? On right. So right just returns the rightmost number of characters, however many you specify. There's an analogous one called left. So that wouldn't be especially helpful to us on this. Yep.
What if the phone numbers didn't have dashes? What if some had dashes and some didn't? It was just the number level wrong.
Oh, okay, good point. So what if, well, let's do that right now. So what if the dashes are just gone sometimes? That's a really reasonable thing. This could have relied on somebody typing this in. Maybe that's where the dashes come from. Someone typed it in. And one day someone decided, you know, I'll put spaces, or I'll put dots, or I'll put no information there. That could be a problem. All right, so let's take a look at another approach. I'm going to go ahead and stop the code here. I'm going to take, we're going to do this several times. I'm going to take this example that we have, and I'm just going to copy it. That's one we want to keep around, you know, for posterity, in case you come back and look at this ever. And I'm just going to name this one get phone number 1. Now my get phone number is still here. I'll modify this one to handle that question. So now let's assume that we can't be sure that the last 12 characters are what we want, but let's assume that it's always going to start with phone : space. Well, there is another function called mid. We have left, right, and mid. The 3 blind mice, the 3 Nephites, 3 Stooges. These are kind of the main 3 functions that we use for parsing text. So mid allows me to look at a particular string and tell it where to start. I want to start at the 4th character. And then tell me how many characters to bring back. So that says start at the 4th character. Is that right? 1st character, 2nd character, 3rd character, 4th character. Yeah. So start with a capital N and then bring 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's right. So mid says start at a character, take a certain number of characters beyond. What would happen if I didn't tell it how many to take? What do you think? Error, error is something you might think would happen, but remember, the whole philosophy in VBA is that if you haven't told me quite what I'm expecting, I'm going to try to figure out, can I guess what you might mean here? You didn't tell me when to stop? I'm going to take the whole rest of the thing. A whole enchilada is coming back. And that's what it does. Start at the 4th character and return the rest of the string. And so another approach that we have here is to say phone number instead of right. Start at the mid, look at full number, and start where? PHONE : space, 1 more character. Start on that first number. That should be 8 characters. Start on the 8th character and bring the rest. And so now, doesn't matter what's there, as long as this thing starts with phone number, or phone, colon, space, and at least one more character, we should be okay. So I'm going to go ahead and run this one and see what we get. I'm going to delete my phone number, put my active cell back on my index, my list page, I'll run this. Back to list, and it didn't do anything. Phone number, phone number, active cell, value. My active cell was in the wrong place when I ran it, so we put the active cell here on my phone number. Make sure, that's a bit confusing. So I have to be on this cell, it's assuming that we're on this cell, and I should be able to run it. There we go. So it still brings in the phone number. It just takes a different route to get there. Do I have a space in the beginning of that? No space. Good. Okay, questions here? You see how MIT works? Now, what if? As was suggested here, we're not sure what's before the colon. It could be anything, but we know the colon's going to be there. It's going to be colon space. Might say telephone number, might say tel, might say cell, might say home, might say office, I don't know. But it's going to say colon, space, and then the number's going to start. A couple of things that we can do. So I'm going to call this phone number 2. Copy it. Oops. Yeah, that's what we got. Phone number, phone 2, and phone number. So now we're going to have to try to figure out where's the colon. So to start with this, I'm going to create another variable called position, or just POS for short. That is short for position. Integer, maybe could get by with a byte. I'm going to go ahead and make it an integer now. So full number is going to get that into my variable. Now I want to ask, where is the colon? Let's come back up here to Nephi Sierra Golden Time as an example to start with. And I want to find out, where does Nephi start in this string? The function, if I want to find where one string is inside another string, I want to find where the string Nephi is inside this whole string, then I'm going to start with, I'm looking in a string. Here's how this is the function. It's called instr, in string. I'm looking in a string. I'm really not thrilled with the order of the arguments here. The first argument is, where do you want to start looking? Before you tell me which string I'm looking at, I got to know where I'm going to start looking. Why that's the first one, I don't know. Start looking at the very beginning, first character. And then I've got the string that I'm looking at. Next argument is the string that I'm looking for. What am I looking for? Nephi. And it will return me the ordinal position of where the second string begins inside the first string. So what do I expect to happen here? Oh yeah, so the question is, does it have to be a string or could it be anything? And the answer is, this can be any expression that evaluates to a string. So I could plug in active cell.value here. That's what an expression is. Actually, that was on the chapter that we didn't talk about. On the schedule for last Wednesday, we didn't talk about expressions and operators. An expression is just any segment of code that evaluates to a single value. So all these things we're looking at right here, these are expressions. 1 plus 1, that's an expression. It can be evaluated to a single value. What's the value? 2, it figures it out, and it doesn't. So 1 plus 1 equals 5. Is that an expression? Yeah, it's false. 2 equals 5, that's a false statement. So as long as VBA can look at it and go, yeah, I can figure that down to one single value, that's an expression. And the case is, typically, any place that I can put a single value, I can put an expression, as long as that expression evaluates to the right kind of value. If this came back as a Boolean value, we might not like it. Okay. So, we never saw what this returned. This should return 4. You know, or maybe we're not so picky. We're just looking for where there's an E. That should return 5. But maybe I don't want to know where this E is. I want to know where the first E after the first 10 characters is. So instead of looking at the first character, start looking at the 11th character and tell me where you find the first E.
What if you want to find the second E?
What if you want to find the second E? Why do you want to find the second E? But you might. You can imagine someday when I wonder where the second E is. That's a little more complicated. What you have to do is make a loop. We'll talk about loops coming up that says, all right, find the first E, or if it's the second one, you can say, find the first one. All right, we'll do it. This is the first E. This is going to look a little bit weird. Stick with me on this. This whole expression right here evaluates the 5. So, push that aside. I want to say in string starting after 5 plus 1, looking for all this other stuff. Ultimately, that's what I want to do. So I want to have a 6 here, and I want to do that. This gives me the 5, right? And so I'm going to say, whoa. This tells me the position of the first E. This says, look at INSTR. This says, look at this string. Where do I want to start? 5 plus 1. Start right after wherever the first one was found, and then look for the next occurrence of E, and that should give me 12. That's how you find the second occurrence. And that's probably how I would find the second occurrence. What if you want to find the 27th occurrence? At that point, you probably make a loop that says, do this 26 times, and then let's find the 27th. Okay, but here's the point, and this is exactly what I was talking about with an expression. This expression right here, this is one argument to the function. I can put any expression here as long as it evaluates to the right type. This is expecting to be an integer. This is going to give me an integer. I can just drop it right in there. Wherever I have that value, I can put an expression. Okay. And now what we want to do is we are looking for the position, start at the first character, looking at my full number, and I'm looking for the colon. One more argument I want to tell you about it. Let me take this back to 1. What if I wanted to look for, I didn't care about case. What's that going to find? Are there any capital E's in that string? No capital E's. By the way, when in string can't find it, it returns 0. Thankfully, it's not an error. It just returns 0. I didn't find it. It says 0. That's how it says it. There's another argument here that's optional, and that is you can do it to be a text comparison. Text comparison is not case sensitive. So you can tell it, don't be case sensitive by saying this constant db text compare. Or for those of you that are more numerically inclined, you could say 1. db text compare just means 1. Okay, so in this case, there's no such thing as an uppercase colon, and so we don't have to specify whether it's uppercase or lowercase. So what this does, this says find the position of the colon, and now we want to do the mid starting where? I'm going to run it to here. Make sure I'm in the right place. I'll run my code to here. Let's see what position is. Right now position is 6. That colon is the 6th position. So where do I want to start to read the phone number? Position plus 2, right. Because 6 is the colon. I don't want to start there. It would take the colon. 7 is the space. I don't want to start there. It would take the space. 8 is where my number starts. So I want to take wherever the colon is, plus 2. And so I'll supply here position plus 2, run that the rest of the way, and that's giving me my address or phone number. So, a little more work, but not too much more work to say, listen, I know there's going to be a colon. I don't know how long the text is before the colon, but I could use that to figure it out. Yes?
Wouldn't it be, because you mentioned before, what if there's not a space after the colon? Wouldn't you also just go +1 on the position and then just trim it to where you take off the space from the other?
Well, the comment is, well, what if I know the colon's going to be there, but sometimes there's a space, sometimes there's not a space, sometimes there are 3 spaces. Yeah, I like it. So let's take a look. Since that just kind of naturally follows onto this one, let's take a look. So at this point, let's say we've got the phone number right here. And now, let's say there could be some spaces on the front. Actually, you're saying +1, in case there's no space. Now we're saying that phone number could have some spaces on the front of it, so let's do this. We can do it in the same step, but I'm going to do it in a separate step. Phone number equals, there's a function called trim. I give it some expression to work on. So I'm going to say, look at whatever's in phone number right now, trim it, and return the trimmed version. All trim does, it takes leading and trailing spaces, and it gets rid of them. So now we're expecting, on this example, we're expecting it to pick up a space because we're now only adding 1 past the colon instead of 2. But if this works right, it should produce a phone number without the space because it's going to get there. Let's take a look at it. I'm going to put the breakpoint. I'll put the breakpoint right here, so I'll run this. Let's look and see what's in phone number. Phone NUMBR. And I have to execute that line. Now, look at what's in phone number. It's kind of hard to see that space. Let's do this. Let's print a capital X. Concatenated with phone number. Now we can see that space. There's a space right there between the X and the phone number. I'm now going to execute the line that trims that out. We'll execute this line again, and it's gotten rid of that space. So the leading space is not there. And it wouldn't matter if there was 1 or 27 or 127. Any number of leading spaces before, it gets rid of it. We'll finish running this. Look back at our list. And I have nothing. Oh, I didn't finish running. F5. Look back at the list. Oh, I moved my active cell over here, so it pushed it over here. That's right. Go back to where it belongs. But it found it. Okay, other questions? Okay, let's look at another approach. This poor phone number. How many times are we going to go after? A couple more times. Get phone number 3. And I'll come back up here. Okay, this next statement that I'm going to talk to you about is one that I would prefer to not have to tell you yet. But our book introduced it. And he said, listen, for full coverage on the functions that manipulate strings, I'm going to show you this one, even though I haven't taught you what you need to understand this one yet. It's coming up. That's right, we're covering this in the same order. We haven't taught that new thing. Let me introduce it to you. So let's see, where's Nephi? Here's Nephi Sierra Volta time. Let me do this. I'm going to replace all these spaces with hyphens, just so you can see what I'm about to do. There's a function called split. Split takes a string that you want to operate on, and then takes another string that says, how do you want to split this thing? I want to split that thing based on the hyphens. Can you guess what this is going to do? It's going to take this one string, find all the hyphens, and chop it up into little strings based on where the hyphen is. It's going to split that string apart into multiple strings. So if I tell this to print, here's the problem. It's going to return like 6 strings. And so when I try to print it, it's going, I don't know what you're talking about. I can't print 6 strings. I can print 1 string. I can't print 6. this actually returns what's called an array of strings. We will spend in this class 2 days talking about arrays. We're not going to cover it right now. But there's the shortcut. I could specify which one I want by saying, you know what, I want like the number 4 string. And it will come back and say, oh, that's Olden. Is that right? Olden is the number 4 string. 1, 2, 3, skip of, and go to Olden. Is that what happens?
Zero.
It's not after the 4th hyphen. Somewhere, someone said, you know, I've been starting to count at number 1 since kindergarten. That's getting boring. We should start counting at 0. This was after he'd had 3 or 4 beers. And he was sitting next to another programmer, and that guy goes, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. Let's do it. And then the next day, they went and wrote this procedure. That's not exactly how it happened. But they said, you know what, sometimes we'd like to start counting at 0. And you know what, I would be okay with that if you started counting at 0 all the time, but they don't. Sometimes it counts as 1, sometimes it counts as 0. Split is, unless you tell it otherwise, it's going to start counting at 0. And so you just have to realize that's the number 0 string, that's the number 1 string. So if you want to pull Nephi out of this, it would be 1. Why is it Nephi, comma? Because we split on the hyphen, and that's what's between the hyphens. So for right now, we're gonna see all the great and wonderful things you can do with arrays. But at this point, with the split, all we're saying is you want to think of it this way: it'll work just like your other functions if after the call to split, you specify a number, and that will pull it out. And so in this case, what we'll say is that we don't need position anymore. We'll just say that phone number instead of equaling the mid, we're going to equal split. We're going to split full number based on what? Colon. And we're going to return the number 1 string. So phone number will have a colon here. We're splitting on the colon. This will be the number 0 string. This will be the number 1 string. Fortunately, we're already trimming it, so that'll get rid of that leading space. And so we can use split to be able to get that phone number as well. I'll run this. Take a look at my data. There's my phone number. Delete it again, go back. And so that's another approach to do it. The split function can be handy that way. It will become even more handy once we learn more about arrays and about loops. Great things with split. Incidentally, split has a partner called join. So if this is going to give me that whole set of strings, I can just join that back together. And I can specify what delimiter I want to put. I'll put a space in. It's going to split this based on the hyphen. It's going to put what in place when it joins it back together? It'll just put that back in place with the spaces. So join takes an array, we'll talk about arrays later, and says, take this array, make it into a string, take all the elements in that array, and just say, here's the first one, put the delimiter, take the next one, put the delimiter, put the next one, put the delimiter, joins them back together. So split and join have those two. You may realize, hey, that could be pretty handy. I could use split and join to replace the occurrences of one string in text with another string. Well, it turns out that's such a common thing to do that there's actually a function built specifically for it. It's called replace. So replace says, look at this string, find every occurrence of the next string and replace it with the third string. You could use split and join to do this, but replace is there built for it. And the nice thing about replace is it's got some other arguments you can put here. So you can tell it where to start. You can tell it how many to do. You can decide whether it's case sensitive or not. So there's other things you can do here. Questions here? Okay, so that is replace. So what might we do with replace? What we could do here, let's decide that, you know what, we really prefer, for whatever reason, we prefer dots instead of hyphens. So we'll take replace. We're going to set phone number to be the replace of, R-E-P-L-A-C-E, looking at phone number, looking for hyphens, replacing them with dots. Run that. You spell phone number correctly. And that should give us a phone number. It's got dots instead of hyphens. Interesting thing I've never tried to do. I always used to like the parentheses around the area code. Pretty much now you got to dial the area code anytime you want to call something. Back in the olden days, you used to only have to dial 7 digits. In the really olden days, you could dial just 4. And it would assume that talking about 4 from your same prefix. I think that was before my time. Olden days, you had to talk to somebody. Okay. So let's do this. I'm going to go ahead and reformat this, and I'm going to comment this line out. I don't like the dots. So instead, what I want to do is I'm going to say phone number is going to start with that opening parenthesis. So it's going to start with the opening parenthesis. I'm then going to concatenate on. I want to replace the first occurrence of a hyphen with a closing parenthesis. Replace. We want to replace, look at phone number. What am I going to find? Hyphen. What am I going to replace it with? Closing parenthesis. Where am I going to start? First character. How many do I want to do? Just one. I don't care whether it's case sensitive or not because there's no such thing as an uppercase parenthesis. So now this should give me a parenthesis. It should give me the whole phone number having replaced the first hyphen with a closing parenthesis. I've never actually tried this before. I think it'll work. Probably want a space in there, so I'll replace it with hyphen or with parenthesis space. Run that again. Sure I'm on the right page. And that's formatted that into a different approach. Questions? Yeah.
Why would we just keep the numbers and change the format of the stuff to the phone number?
Oh, so another approach. You could say, you know what? This whole formatting thing in Excel, you can actually change that to be, make it into a format. Yeah, we can do that. You know how to do that?
Not off my head.
Yeah, me either. Let's give it a shot. So let's first do it over here. So let's just take these numbers and just the numbers like this. Control 1 should bring up my formatting. That's a great keystroke, by the way. No one knows that keystroke. Control 1 just brings up your cell format. And is there a way to do this? Is there a choice here, or do we have to build it up by hand?
You go to custom and then ask for
Custom.
Where is this?
You're teasing me. You're teasing me. Text me.
Special.
Special.
Sorry, on special.
Phone number. Yeah, that's pretty nice. That's pretty slick. All right, how would we do that through code? That's not too bad. I don't know how to do it. What am I going to do? I'm going to record myself doing it. Okay, so let's undo that. Let's hit the macro. Control F1. Or Control 1. Come down to special. Phone number. Okay. Stop recording. What has it done? What hath Excel done? I don't have to type that. Copy that. Come back to module 1. Okay, I like this example here actually, so I'm going to copy that. Call this, what am I on? Call this number 4. Okay, so your phone number 4. So your suggestion is just trim the phone number. Oh, replace all the hyphens. So phone number just equals replace, find the hyphens, replace it with nothing, 0 length string. Do them all. And then, after we have put it in the active cell dot number format equals that. You know, if you haven't worked with these format strings, they can be kind of weird. And yeah, that's why I hate to have to type. I'm glad they gave it to me in the kind of pre-done one. I'm sure if I Googled it, somebody would have also talked about it. Let's come to a different one, because this one's already formatted that way, so I'll come down to Shane Allred. It's still going to be my phone number, because that's where my sheet is. Oops, make sure I'm on the right active cell. Should be able to run that. And, oh, yeah, it wasn't the active cell that I wanted to format. It was offset 2 from the active cell. Yeah, in fact, there it is. Try this again on Greg Anderson. Get on the right page. Got to start over here. Start this. Try it again. And there we go. The number is just the base number, and we applied the formatting to it. Other questions? We got one more thing to cover. All right. So, oh, there's Nephi. Nephi serial time. Replace that. Okay. What if I wanted the uppercase version? View case. Give it any string and it returns the uppercase version of it. I could do L case. The lowercase version. What if I want proper case? P case? No such thing. Fortunately, all those functions that you're used to working with inside of Excel, you can use them in VBA too. They're just a little trickier to get to. What's it called in Excel? If you want to make something in proper case, it's called proper. Doesn't work just to say proper, but what I can say is worksheet function. All one word, dot. And there they are, folks. They're all here. Well, they're almost all here. It takes a long time to scroll to proper. There's the P's, the PO's, the PR. Proper, there it is. You can type it, by the way. So now, if I pass this to proper, well, it's already proper. Oh, no, it's not. You should uppercase every. You should uppercase every word. The point is that I can get to all of my worksheet functions with a couple of caveats. Here's the first warning. If there is an analogous VBA function, you don't get to use the Excel function. You really can't. Is there, if I wanted to do an uppercase in Excel, what's the function called? It's just called upper. So, upper. No can do. What it's saying is here is that, sorry, in fact, anytime you try to use a built-in function, a worksheet function, and it says, sorry, that function's not here, but you know it's there, what that means is there is a function built into VBA, a native function that does exactly the same thing. Use it. It doesn't tell you what it is. You have to figure that out. But it won't let you use it if it's built in. And then here's the other warning. The other warning is, let's try this one. Let's try sum. So the sum function can take up to 30 arguments. 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6. Should be around 20. Or you can give it a range. Now, if I was just trying to sum a range with the sum function, I would just like tell it A1 colon A10. That's how this would work in there. But this is not syntactically valid in VBA. That colon, we use the colon for something, but not for this. So I try to execute that, so we go, yeah, we know what you're talking about. So you might think, well, maybe I'll just give that as a string. And it's still going to say, yeah, we still know what you're talking about. You have to, if you want to refer to a range that you're passing to the function, you've got to give it a valid VBA range. How do I make this into a range? Range. So that's the other thing that's a little bit weird, is that the arguments now have to be VBA flavor arguments rather than how you would use them inside a sum. So anything that you're doing in your worksheet, those functions, you can just invoke that right here in VBA as well. Other questions? That's enough for today. Thanks for coming. I will see you Wednesday. Class dismissed. Thank you, you're too kind.